Good day everyone, I am Arlen Villegas and I am going to report the 4 cases of national human rights abuses here in the Philippines. So first we have war on drugs, and the second one, enforced disappearance in the Philippines. Third, torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. And lastly we have the conflict related abuses. So first we have the war on drugs in the year 2019. So since President Rodrigo Duterte took office in 2016, his war on drugs has killed thousands of mostly urban poor people with impunity. The security forces have killed hundreds of activists, rights defenders, indigenous leaders, lawyers, journalists, trade unionists, and environmentalists in a counterinsurgency campaign that involves the vilification called red tagging of people deemed to support communist insurgents. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights said that it continued to receive all allegations of human rights violations by members of the Philippine National Police, adding that deaths continued to be reported in anti-illegal drug operations. So since the drug war began in 2016, the government has itself reported that police killed more than 6,200 people in anti-drug operations, while OHCHR previously put the figure at more than 8,600. Domestic human rights groups estimate the drug war toll, including killings by unidentified gunmen, at 3 times the government figure. Virtually all of these killings remain uninvestigated. Emily Soriano, holding a picture of her 15-year-old son who was gunned down in Manila in 2016, says she is turning to the International Criminal Court after falling for years to attain justice in the Philippines. So the OHCHR cited key obstacles to enforcing the UN Joint Program, including limited oversight of human rights investigations, inadequate investigation capacity, and interagency cooperations, and limited forensic capacity and protracted judicial processes. It also noted that inadequate victim and witness support and protection and fear of reprisals that undermine victims' engagement in the program. Among the office recommendations is the need for further progress on accountability. So we have the enforced disappearance in the Philippines. So the Philippines has a long history of issues related to human rights violations. So many reported cases of enforced and involuntary disappearances have been recorded from martial law under the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos up to now. So what constitutes enforced or involuntary disappearance? An enforced or involuntary disappearance has 3 elements according to Republic Act 10353. So a person is deprived of liberty via an arrest, detention, or abduction. The perpetrators are state agents or working with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state. So there is a conscious effort to conceal the location of the disappeared person. Not giving the information regarding the whereabouts of an abducted person leads to him or her virtually non-existing. This puts the person outside the protection of the law. So under RA 10353, the penalty of reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment shall be imposed on the following: people who directly committed the act, people who directly forced, instigated, encouraged, or induced others to commit the act, people who cooperated in the act by means of other actions. So officials who allowed to act even if it is within their power to stop it from happening, people who cooperated in the execution of the act. The law passed in 2012 is the first of its kind in Asia. It sees enforced disappearance as a special or separate offense from kidnapping, serious illegal detention, or murder, according to Nilda Sevilla, co-chairperson of Families of Victims of Involuntary Disappearance, which is FIND. According to latest data from FIND, there are at least 2,334 reported victims of enforced disappearance in the Philippines since the administration of Ferdinand Marcos. Out of this number, 1,996 were documented victims, 1,165 are still missing, while 587 surfaced alive and 244 were found dead. The Marcos dictatorship recorded the most number of victims with 926, followed by Corazon Aquino with 540 and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo with 336. There were at least 31 cases during the administration of Benigno Aquino III. So under the administration of Rodrigo Duterte, FIND were able to document 45 victims. The number of reported victims, however, is much higher than documented. So moreover, for Sevilla, the number one roadblock in the full implementation of the Anti-Enforced and Involuntary Disappearance Law is the lack of common understanding of the concept of human rights. Sevilla hopes that if all of these are addressed, people will see a declining number of victims. According to her, kung na-implement yan, malaking maitutulong talaga niyan to prevent disappearances in the future. So now let's move on to the next case, which is the torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, year 2021. According to the Commission on Human Rights, members of the security forces and police were accused to routinely abusing and sometimes torturing suspects and detainees. Common forms of abuse during arrest and interrogations reportedly included electric shock, cigarette burns, and suffocation. As of August, the CHR had investigated 21 cases of alleged torture involving 25 victims. It suspected police involvement in 17 of the cases. The NGO Task Force Detainees of the Philippines monitored one torture case as of October, which happened in 2012 but was reported to the task force in early 2021. In July, the CHR investigated the death and alleged torture of Carlo Layaog, a person with a mental disability who was accused of stealing cable wires in Barangay 3, Coron, Palawan Province. In April, village officials in General Trias, Cavite Province detained 28-year-old Darren Piña Redondo for curfew violations. According to media reports, Piña Redondo and others were taken to the local municipal plaza by police, made to do 100 push-ups, and then forced to repeat the exercise because they were not in sync, ultimately completing 300 repetitions. So Darren then reportedly struggled to walk home, where he lost his consciousness and died hours later. On April 5, authorities accused 11 Cebu City police officers of robbery, extortion, and the rape of 2 women detained separately at the Cebu City Police Station for alleged possession of firearms and illegal drugs. In October, the Quezon City Regional Trial Court acquitted 19 police officers, led by Police Superintendent Marvin Marcos, allegedly involved in the 2016 killing of former Albuera Leyte Mayor Roland Espinosa while the mayor was in police custody. Media and other observers widely criticized the decision as unjust and corrupt. So the 19 officers were charged with killing Espinosa in his cell after President Duterte tagged him as a criminal along with many other government, police, and judicial officials. So Marcos, a former chief of the PNP's Criminal Investigation and Detention Group Region 8, was promoted to chief of the 12th Region Group 15 months after the Espinosa killing. To try to ensure dismissed personnel would not be rehired, in August, PNP Chief Eleazar ordered the Directorate for Personnel and Records Management to create a database of officers removed from service and that all appeals filed by dismissed personnel be immediately resolved. The PNP's Counterintelligence Task Force also monitored police personnel suspected of illegal activities. So efforts continued to reform and professionalize the national police through improved training, expanded community outreach, and salary increases. Human rights modules were included in all PNP career courses, and the Police Human Rights Affairs Office conducted routine training nationwide on human rights responsibility in policing. So several NGOs suggested that national police training courses should have a follow-up mechanism to determine the effectiveness of each session. Finally, we have the last case of national human rights abuses, the conflict-related abuses. For decades, the country has contended with armed Muslim separatist movements represented by groups such as the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the Moro National Liberation Front, a communist insurgency supported by a nationwide NPA presence and violence by a smaller transnational terrorist organizations such as ISIS East Asia, the Abu Sayyaf Group, Mauti Group, Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, and other terrorist groups and criminal syndicates. The NPA, ISIS East Asia, Abu Sayyaf Group, Mauti Group, Ansar al-Khalifa Bangsamoro Front, and other violent extremist groups used roadside bombs, ambushes, suicides, bombings, and other means to kill political figures and other civilians, including persons suspected of being military and police informers. So from January to August, the AFP's Center for Law of Armed Conflict recorded 3 cases of hostages by terrorist organizations involving 4 civilians, with 2 of the cases filed at the courts. 3 Indonesian fishermen were kidnapped by the Abu Sayyaf group on the border with Malaysia and taken to Sulu province. In the year to July, the National Police Women and Children Protection Center rescued 7 soldiers from armed anti-government groups. The AFP Center for Law of Armed Conflict recorded 10 children used as soldiers by communist terrorist groups from January to June. There was no evidence of use of recruitment of child soldiers by government units. So during the year, the UN Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict verified the recruitment and use of 12 children by armed groups including Abu Sayyaf, the Bangsamoro Front, and the NPA. So the United States continues to provide military assistance to the Philippines despite the Duterte government's poor human rights record. In June, the Biden administration notified Congress of a proposed sale of $2.5 billion in arms to the Philippines, including fighter jets and 2 kinds of missiles. In September, both countries announced that they would restart defense cooperation agreements that had been stalled by President Duterte's earlier threat to withdraw, including an agreement for building facilities for U.S. troops in the Philippines. In July, the Philippines and the United Nations signed a 3-year joint program that aims to improve the human rights situation in the country. The program, which critics deemed inadequate, was the UN's response to calls by members of the UN Human Rights Council to extend technical cooperation and capacity building to the Philippines, which has seen deterioration of human rights to the Duterte's war on drugs. The program components include the creation of a national mechanism for reporting and follow-up on human rights, as well as human rights-based approaches to drug control. I think this ends off my report. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something. God bless us all.